Good evening. Hi, I am Joshua Reaves, Director of University Theater, and tonight we are on site. We are back in Thompson Hall with the one and only John McILWEE. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you. Good to be in the theater.
Yes, same. I'm upstairs right now in our classroom, and John is in the Kennedy McILWEE Studio Theater downstairs on row A, it looks like. So, John, thanks so much for coming in. You've been a director, you've been an actor, a costume designer, a fashion designer, an educator, administrator. I mean, the list goes on and on. What is it that you do? What was it that brought you the most joy? What position did you like the most? And what does that mean to be one of those positions?
Well, it's very easy to talk about it after retirement because I realized when I wasn't doing any of those things, I realized that I never had a favorite. I mean, I love to direct, I love to design, I love doing makeup, I loved being an actor. I had so much fun being an actor. And I was just one of those lucky people who decided early to train in different theater areas so that I wouldn't be stuck. And consequently, I was as excited about the last project as I was about the first one I did.
Well, let's talk about that first one. Can you recall what the first project that you did and what you did for that project?
Barely, but I can recall. I actually designed My Fair Lady
Okay.
back then with a very, very good budget. Of course, they didn't know me yet that I needed a good budget, obviously. But it was a production that I came into 3 weeks before they opened. And it was all designed and sewn and made by the time they opened because it was for a theater that was opening first time. And it was beautiful and they wanted a beautiful show. And I remember thinking one night when the audience was there the first night that when one of the scenes came out with all these costumes, they started to applaud. And I didn't know that they did that ever. So I was so excited. But the problem was I thought that now every time I have a beautiful costume show, that they would applaud, and they don't. It was just a rarity. And that's one of the reasons I remember that show.
Awesome. And what was the first time well, first off, you have an MFA in costume design and you have an
Yes.
MFA in directing. So did you go, which one did you get first, and when did you start directing?
Actually, I didn't have two MFAs. I had an MA first, which is one of the
MA.
reasons I wanted to go back and get an MFA. And I started directing actually early on when I was first involved in it. I wanted a general degree first because I thought I needed to do that. And then I got all excited about one field, and that was directing. And I had a mentor I still follow a lot of his procedure when I direct. He was the first person who took an interest and thought that, and also told me, don't do just one thing. You're okay at lots of things. Pick them out and do them different times, and you'll enjoy it and you'll stay at it much longer. And he was absolutely right. So I guess the first time I directed was children's theater. I was hired as the director of a children's theater, and I was there for quite a few years. I wrote the plays that were being done, and they were musicals mostly. We wrote original music for the plays, and they were just exciting and fun. We performed in a 1,600 seat auditorium for children, and it was full every performance all through the years. They bust them in, so
Okay.
it was different. And then I got a little tired of children's theater after we had the puppet mobile that went around the entire state of West Virginia. That was fun. And I got tired of that and decided to spend more time paying attention to the other things I liked. So when I
And
directed it, it was first for children, not children.
gotcha.
Children
And
hate,
so, oh, did they?
of course.
And so your first show without children, moving into working with adult actors, what show was that about, or where were you during that time, and
Well,
how
actually,
did you
it was in a coffee house.
oh,
That
really?
was really big when I was in school. So when I came out, I worked at a place called The Last Resort, which I thought was clever. And we did it for, I would say 6, 7 years. The first legitimate show I directed there was a show called Glitz that I had compiled of musical numbers. And that was the first one I directed. I was in quite a few before I directed. And then the first straight show that I did there, good God, I'm not sure I can remember which one it was. There were so many. But I did act
Mhm.
lots of times before I directed there.
I see.
And then they asked me if I wanted to direct, and of course, I never say no to anything. I'm sure it's going to be the best experience I ever had in my life if I do. So I said yes, and had a really good time.
Okay, and so being either on stage or out in the house directing the show, has there been a show that has always been near and dear to your heart, or a show that you've always it's the one show that you've always wanted to do, or the show that you always want to go back and do again? You have a
You
title
know,
list that you love?
it's so funny. The shows that I like to direct were not necessarily shows that I would have wanted to be in, or there was a part that was appropriate for me and my style and my age. So the first show that I remember that I loved, that I hated closing, was a production of I Do, I Do.
Okay.
And I loved that. And then from then on, they kept asking me to act in two people productions, like Same Time Next Year, Love Letters, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I did a couple musical reviews, just on love with my partner, who we still sing together, or we
Mm.
did before all the things started. And after that, it was a long time before I got into the big musicals. They asked me to do Gypsy in a dinner theater
Mm.
that only seated 150 people. And it, that was a challenge, let's say, for the first time, because I was used to these big stages of musicals, My Fair Lady and Hello Dolly and all those. And when I said yes, because I was afraid they wouldn't ask me again if I didn't say yes. So I said yes, and it turned out to be a miraculous experience. I learned so much by having to be limited in size to what I was doing. And if you'll remember, they told me I couldn't do Chicago here on our small stage.
I believe I remember that. Yeah.
And we proved them wrong. And that's because over the years, I did lots of musical reviews, and I did lots of full musicals on small stages, and I did lots of straight plays on small stages.
Mhm.
And I love doing it, even though most people think I also love overcasting so I can have large crowds on stage. I figure that if you're going to go big, you might as well go all the way.
Well, some of the biggest shows I've done, John, was under your direction.
Oh, good. I hope it wasn't a
Well,
bad
oh
experience.
no, not at all. No, but I do want to, everyone knows you here, with your work as a theater designer, as a theater director, as an actor, as an educator. But let's take a step back to your work in fashion design. Can you speak to us a bit about the world of fashion and how you got your start there, and why you moved over to costume design and not stay with fashion?
Well, first of all, I was in theater first
Oh,
before I
okay.
ever did fashion. I did private clients for people over the
Yes.
years, but I never tried to get on a firm or anything. And then all at once, I thought I don't want to burn out, and I had always been interested in fashion. In fact, the first review I got on my costumes, the reviewer very astutely said that Mr. McILWEE is quite good at adding fashion to the restoration period, which I which I did. I would put modern touches on purpose, anachronisms on purpose, if I got a director who was willing to let me do that.
Mhm.
And so I did a lot of that to begin with, and then people started asking me to design things for them, wedding dresses and all sorts of evening gowns. I liked that because I've always been terribly interested in women's fashion and not terribly interested in men's fashion.
Mhm.
And eventually, I was sitting with my daughter while she was doing her homework one day, and she was using crayons and paper, the colored paper,
Mhm.
uh, contact paper.
Yeah.
And I was reading Vogue magazine, of all things, while I was waiting for her to finish. And they had an advertisement for a National Fashion Design Award. And it was over in 2 days. It'd been going on for 6 months, but it was over in 2 days. So I didn't have anything in hand there except the contact paper and crayons. So I designed 2 dresses and sent them in that afternoon. I'd
Wow.
never joined a contest like that before. Um, and I didn't hear anything, didn't hear anything. And finally, about a month later, I got a phone call, and I had forgotten that I'd even sent them in, and I had won, which was very nice. It paid for 2 wonderful trips to Europe. But also, I was to go to New York to be on the Today Show and accept the award. So I went up and I did that. And the company said, "We'd like you to be our head designer. Try it out and see if you like it." So I did. I did 4 seasons. And then I realized, because I'm smart that way, this isn't for me. I don't like the
Okay.
people in fashion quite as much as I love the people in theater. And I was missing the theater
Mm. Yeah.
wholeheartedly. And being in New York and not being able to do it because I
There's
was
that
so
too.
busy with the seasons and the fashion design was great. But I had my day in the sun in fashion. I still love fashion. I
Mhm.
still have some private clients that I love now to shop with them. I love spending their money instead of mine. And so I still enjoy it, but it's not theater.
It's a different world.
It's a
Yeah.
different world entirely. Different
Gotcha.
world entirely, and not the least bit. The parties were glamorous, but that's about it. I got to go to some swell parties and meet some people like Lauren McCall and people like that who just I'd always wanted to meet anyway. So it was great. And
What I Now you've met other people,
oh yeah,
presidents as
oh
well
yes,
as
I
doing makeup. Can you tell us a story about one of the five? Well, first tell us what five presidents you actually met, and do you have a good story to share?
well, Mr. Carter, and yes, that's my favorite story.
Okay.
And well, no, I guess Mr. Clinton's my favorite story, but and Mr. Obama and Mr. Bush first, the elder. Is that
Mhm.
5?
Yeah. Carter,
Yeah,
Bush, Obama, Clinton. Four. Yeah. There's
yeah.
four. Yep. Okay.
And
So
the the best stories were two. I was waiting for Mr. Clinton. second time that I worked with him with makeup. And the first time I had been doing cabaret here, actually. And they called me and asked me if I'd, do makeup because it was easier to get someone local than it was to bring somebody in for that. So I did. We had a wonderful talk. We were by ourselves except for Secret Service. And he asked me what I was doing. And I told him cabaret. And I said where we were doing it. And so looking forward to it. We were almost finished. And two or 3 years later, I can't remember. It must have been, but it was a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me to do it again. I didn't have to go through the Secret Service problems as I did the first time. So I guess it was convenient. And so I went and I was there and I was in the room by myself, playing with brushes and putting makeup out and waiting and late. And the Secret Service man came in and said, we're operating on Clinton Standard Time. So we're a little late. So finally I was just standing there with the makeup kit and the door burst open. And Mr. Clinton rushed in and said, oh, John, I didn't know where you were. I went to the bathroom and then I came out the wrong door. So I figured you were here. And I knew that the Secret Service were not with him. They were not there. They had probably waiting at the other door of the bathroom.
Wow.
And I said, well, should we continue? And he said, oh, yeah. And then he asked me, first thing he said, now what about that production of Cabaret that you were doing when I was here last?
From 2 or 3 years later. Yeah.
2 or 3 years later. And I thought, well, I know why people like him. Because he is so personable and so with it, Mr. Carter was your grandfather. He was the sweetest man. That I was afraid because it was my first time, and the first time I was the Secret Service. And every time I took something out of the kit, I went like this to show the Secret Service that it wasn't a knife or something. I was going to kill the president with it. But he was very nice to me. They all were. They all were. People like that can afford to be very nice, and they are.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, John. And okay, so you had done some fashion, you came back to theater. What brought you to North Carolina? Originally from West Virginia, and you've been to New York and other places, but what brought you to Raleigh?
Well, that's an easy question. I was tired. I was tired of 20 years of being hither, thither, and yon. And not tired of doing it, but tired of traveling, tired of making contracts and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't like it very much at that point. And so I left New York and went home. And I decided I wanted to spend more time in educational theater because I did enjoy that the first time I did it. And so I found a place that liked me. And I told myself I'd stay for 2 years. That was 32 years before I left. And when I got here, it was such an unusual program. I lost all fear of it not being the traditional theater program. And Charlie, who was the director of the theater then, said to me that if you want to do something, just make it happen. You can do it. If you can do it, you can do it. We're behind you. So almost immediately, I thought every place I had interviewed and had offered me a job, had offered me a job as a costumer or a director. And I didn't want to just do one thing. So this was the only place that said, if you can plan it, if you can prepare it, you can do it. And I took him at his word. And from then on, it was all uphill. We took advantage of our uniqueness, and I was able to direct when I wanted to direct, and do costumes and scenery when I wanted to, and makeup and teach costuming and style and other things. And it was an incredible 2 years. So at the end of it, I loved everything about being here, especially the students who I found to be extremely talented
Mhm.
in a non-majors program. So we started trying to make it the best program we could for them, which I think you are doing right now. All the new things that you've done since I left are great ideas, and I'm sure everybody's appreciating it. And have gotten so many new students in by doing new things. I tried new things, and sometimes they worked, and sometimes they didn't. But I loved every minute of it. Loved every minute of it.
Well, let's talk about some of those things that worked, that you tried and worked out great. Talk to us. Some people on the call may not have heard of Magical Dinner. Can you tell us what was that, and how did that become a thing at NC State?
Yeah, 25-year thing. It lasted quite a long time. Madrigal Dinner was done, actually, they were doing it before I arrived. And they were about ready to stop doing it. And I, the idiot that I was at that time, said, "Oh no, let me write a new script and direct it and do the costumes." And it was a full dinner at the student center. Fabulous meal, best food, and all the people in it. There would be like 50 to 60 students in the dinner. Were all costumed in madrigal costumes. And we had such a success the first year I did it back that everybody was willing to continue for a little bit. And I had great help then. I remember uh, that we had lots of meetings on whether to continue. And we did for quite a few years because it just got more and more successful. And then it didn't. Then we started having problems selling it. And then we, not big ones, but just enough to know what was coming. And we had a difficult time with some of our partners for different aspects of it. The choir was still with us, the university choir, but we had a difficult time getting a little orchestra together, and we needed that. We had a hard time finding magicians and tumblers and everything else you have in a madrigal. And when that became a problem, we we wrote it out a couple more years. And then when we had to move out of the building and there wasn't any place to do the work, the rehearsal work and the technical work, we stopped doing it and we didn't continue when we came back in.
Awesome. All right. So, John, can you take us through what is your process when it comes to designing costumes? Like, how do you bring what's in your head to the stage? Can you take us through those steps?
Well, it's pretty much the same. Again, I had a fabulous mentor in costume also. And I loved the way he worked and I loved the way he related to everybody. And for me, that was half the battle, the relationship between all the people involved in producing this production. And I noticed that I really picked up years later that I had picked up so many things from him, so much of the procedure. I have my own ideas, but the procedure I follow is pretty much the same in every show. I try to learn the play backwards and forwards, first of all. I read it and I read it aloud. I read it aloud to hear a voice saying the dialogue. And then after I feel comfortable with that, usually we have the first meeting with the tech team and the director, if I'm not the director. Uh, and when you first meet with people, you're amazed at all the different directions that everybody saw the play that you didn't see. And if you're a good collaborator, you start stealing ideas, as many as you can, and you let everybody have their say. That doesn't mean that it's always going to happen that way, but it does mean that's how you should begin. So that has become a very important part of my procedure. Afterwards, I do my first sketches, usually in pencil, and I fight myself through designing too much. I
Mm.
over design. If there's one, like I overcast, I over design. If there is one costume that particularly interests me, I'll do it 4 or 5 times before I'll
Mm.
show it to anybody. And then I'll show them the one I think is the most appropriate. And after that, I go through all my notes about character, climate, profession,
Mhm.
uh, gender. I mean, everything that you can think of, whether they fell down and tell you in the dialogue the day before the play starts, whether they're in love with Billy before the play starts, whether they are getting ready to travel to Hawaii from Alaska. All those are notes that the costume designer needs to have and needs to know. And you develop a character sheet that you can, look back on whenever you need to. And then I start picking out from my designs, the pencil designs, which ones I think most appropriately fulfill the needs of the character. Because when that character walks on stage for the first time,
Mhm.
if it doesn't tell something about the character, the costume's wrong. Regardless of whether it's rich or poor, it's wrong. So then after choosing the ones I think are right, I do color renderings.
Mm.
And I'm an idiot because I'm still doing what my mentor told me not to do, or I have up till the royal family, and that is do my plates I do them in charcoal, I do them in ink, I do them in pencil, colored pencil. Mostly I do them in watercolor because it's quicker. And, but then I spend time doing that. If I don't like the way someone's standing in one of my costume plates, I change it and do another one, just the same
Mm.
costume, but standing differently. I make all those changes before I show the director. And then that's next production meeting is with the director saying, is this what you're looking for? You told me this, did I fulfill that?
Mhm.
And that's what you're trying to do. I don't consider myself, except when I was a playwright, I don't consider myself the primary artist in any production. I think the director has the say, but he's not or she is not the primary artist.
Mhm.
And so I think that's why I've got such a collaborative bone in my body. I want us all to feel good about the project.
And it sounds like that carries over into your directing and in your acting as well. The approach to the work.
Absolutely. There have been people who've been afraid to cast me
Oh,
because
really?
because they knew I was a director and I was a designer. And there were designers who were afraid to work with me when costume designers when I was the director. And I don't think any of them, I hope any of them, found me to be so difficult
Mm.
that they wouldn't work with me again. And
Do
that's
you
what
have a
I
funny story? Do you have a funny story to elaborate on that? Something that comes to mind, or
well,
just
lots of things come to mind. I had some experiences with some actors that as the director or as the costumer, but we all can recount those, that they're very difficult sometimes. Uh, Actors have a hard time, and I can say this since I'm trained as one, not believing that they're not the primary
Mm.
artist in the show. And audiences rather follow along with that because that's what they're watching and
Mm.
that's what they're enjoying. They don't sit back there and go, oh, they put 7 bolts in that 2x4 to hold the stage together. One of the technicians had to do that, but that's their artistry.
Mhm.
And the audience doesn't count that, or unless they know us and they're there to see what work we did. But yeah, I had one show. It was a military USO show,
Mm.
and
Okay.
we were selected to take funny, not funny thing. I did that forever. Uh, we were taking a little chap. Not a funny thing. Anyway, I know everybody who did it. Leslie Burkess and Anyway, we were
Yeah.
selected to take this little musical,
Okay.
and uh, they weren't going to take me as both director and an actor in the show because they would have to pay me two different things. That's the way their contracts worked, whatever
Okay.
it was that you were paid. So if I did makeup one night, I would have to be paid for it. And so
Mm.
we all had to, I had to teach the whole cast how to do their own makeup, which was hard because they all had ideas. We blended the ideas by the time we were ready to fly. And we flew, and they forgot to my book was left on the tarmac. They got
Oh.
they accidentally got everything in, but the packet that had my production book in it. Well, right before that, my stage manager had decided that to be safe, he wanted to put his stage management book in with mine because he knew mine would get there. So we got there, and no, I said, "Do you know the cues? Do you know all the cues?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, then I'll sit beside you when I'm off stage, but I can't
Yeah.
act and think,
Uh-huh.
oh, this next light." Except I got on stage and there was a big light cue coming up and it was slow and I went and raised my
No.
hand to him and indicated that was the light cue. It
Oh
took me a
no.
few moments. I never liked acting in shows where I designed the costumes either, because
Ah.
if there was something wrong, they expected me to know what was going on.
Mm.
You know, my zipper's down, you should have told me, or you should have come behind me if it's girl's dress and zip me up all enough, you know. And I wanted to concentrate on the acting part because that was the fun part for me.
Mm. Wow. Over the past year, things have changed big time,
Oh, yes.
and over the past 32 years of your career here at NC State, things have changed. Is there one thing that you feel has like what do you feel has changed the most in theater over the past 30 years? Is there one thing that you could point to or
Well,
say,
I'm not
"Oh my
sure
goodness."
there's just one thing, Josh.
Yeah.
The excitement of the theater seems to have stayed. The commitment has changed a little bit. I'm finding people a lot more concerned, perhaps, with what they're doing and not what we are doing.
Mm.
Uh, and I found that in many different places. I was lucky I was here because we created a staff that was so collaborative that when I was asked to do something somewhere else, I missed that collaboration.
Mm.
And I noticed that anytime I did something off campus in say the last 10 years, that the level of commitment, oh, I have a cocktail party to go to, I can't be at rehearsal tonight kind of thing. And I was not trained that way. And I was in my early years, I didn't work with people. I mean, it was too much. The show
Mm.
must go on and you have to be there to offer your part, regardless of what that part may be. So I'm hoping it was just things politically weren't inviting. People were a little more full of themselves than, than perhaps everybody else. And so I'm hoping that will change. And the way things work in cycles, I'm awfully sure that we get all kinds of people as theater experts, professionals, and amateurs. And we'll get back to the different types of commitment as we go on. So that's really the only thing I noticed that's
Yeah.
changed, other than us not being able to do shows.
Yeah, where's that? Well, and so while you were also at NC State, you created a new summer program, a new summer theater series you call Theaterfest. Can you tell us how did that come to fruition?
Uh, I had done every project that I wanted to do,
Mhm.
and I was talking with Terry Janney, our lighting designer at the time, and I had convinced her to direct at some point during the year. I convinced her to direct Cattle on Train Roof, such an easy show to begin your directing career with. It was a huge success. And we were talking, I was talking, I said, we got to come up with something new. And she said, yeah, what about a summer theater? And I said, well, I don't want to stretch it out all summer because that never gives us time to get ready for the next season. I said, but how about if we did it, all at once? And we started with 2. They were really successful. We couldn't run it long enough to the 2 shows to do it. And then, so the next year, we talked about figuring out a schedule that we could do 3. So you could go to all 3 shows in 1 week if you wanted to. Great success, huge success. And for 9 years, we didn't have a seat to sell. It was so successful. But we were the only summer theater in town. And we were the only kind of rep theater. I said, we'll cast people in a couple of them so people can see their actors doing different things. Let's try to change the set overnight back and forth, which was probably the reason we stopped doing it. And but we did it within the month of June. It was a big success. We had professional actors then from Wilmington in the first couple seasons. We've had some that live here too, and we had. I wanted to have a student or students, depending on the show, in the cast so they could learn from how the professionals act, how they perform, and whatever. And I can't tell you how much fun Theaterfest was every year. We even got the faculty was in 1 year. Everybody was in the show 1 year. And I invited the chancellor and the deans and everybody were in at different times, depending on what the show was. They all played convicts in Man Who Came to Dinner one night. And so they loved it. We got great support. We got an incredible audience built. And it seems to be, except for this interruption, it seems to be going quite well. Yeah. I enjoyed last summer.
Yeah, no, we're all ready to get back to being in person as soon as possible.
Oh, yes.
So you mentioned that you also have, you're not the primary artist when you're the director, when you're the designer, but you have operated as the primary artist as a playwright in the past. How did you get into playwriting, and is there a play that you've written that's the more special one, the favorite?
There are lots of reviews that I've written all the dialogue for, but I got into writing full plays when I was in children's theater. They didn't have the biggest budget in the world, but if you could spend it on the effects, then it would look much better. And so I took the money that was being paid to have the original plays done, and I wrote them with a friend who is a musician who's incredible, John Lehman. And 2 of them, 2 different years, won the National Arts and Letters Council Award for Children's Theater. And so when I got into that, I realized I could write, but I put too much, like I talk, I put too much dialogue in. It causes a problem. But over the years, I wrote several things. The best experience I had with, other than the ones that won the award, because they were done everywhere, including on KDKA in Pittsburgh years and years ago. And we were doing the first gala here for the arts. And we called it then the Stage Door Gala. And I needed something to know what to do. So I did the 100 Years of the Little Black Dress fashion exhibit in the Greg, with the Greg. And I wrote a one-woman play on Coco Chanel that we happened to have a wonderful professional actress who was able to perform that the night of the gala. That was the entertainment, and the exhibit they went into for the reception. And it was a huge success. So obviously the gala went on and on for quite a while. And then it got too much work, and evidently it disappeared because of that. So we had a wonderful time the first one and every one we did. And
Well, I
we
think
usually we
I said,
usually
I think
do.
we have a few. Oh,
Oh
I'm
no, go
sorry, John.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think we have a few on the call on our show tonight that were a part of the gala, and I remember when I first got here, I think it was the last year we had one.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
After we got to work done.
Yeah, yeah, and so okay, you've also been in the classroom throughout the time here at NC State. Was there a particular course or class that you were more fond of that you really enjoyed teaching, especially to non-major students?
Style. It was called
Style.
Style, Dress, and Change. And they asked me to do that the first year I was here because they had no one at that time, even on campus, who had been either in professionally in fashion design or had, taught it anywhere else. And I taught a styles class before. And so we created it, and it has had stayed around for as long, I guess, as long as I was there.
Yeah, yeah, it sure did.
And
Wow.
it was, of course, all about beautiful clothes. So how could I not enjoy it? And history, which is my fave.
Yeah, yeah. So, John, what are you up to today? You were just talking before we started that you've been reading a lot of books. What's going on with you?
Well, I've been reading a couple books to see a couple books on the same subject and the
Mhm.
same person to see if there was a small play in those books. I think there is. I haven't put anything to paper except notes.
Okay.
So I think there is, and I want to try it again. It's been quite a few years since I wrote a full play.
Okay.
And so I'd like to go back to that. So that's really the main thing. Other than that, I'm very limited. I can do anything sitting down,
Mm.
but I can't do it, which means unless somebody's got a part for somebody in a wheelchair on stage, I don't see myself acting much anymore. But I can still direct and design. My hands are, I crippled in a car accident right before I retired, and they're getting worse, and it's harder, but I'm practicing drawing every night just to get a competent
Mm.
sketch. I used to like my sketches. Now I'm a little, they're not where I want them to be. So those are really the only things I can do. I love research, so I will continue that always, even if it ends up, it never sees the light of day.
Mm.
Somebody
Now,
wants me to
in
do a
your
book on costumes, on just the pictures, which I would love to do, but I can't see anybody calling me up and saying, "We want a book of your costume plates to sell."
So we do have a question here from Rich Holly. Rich asks, plays are so full of history, culture, and statements on the human condition. What are some of your favorite plays to inform and educate students about these kinds of things?
Well, I will go back a ways. The first time I directed The Duchess of Malfi, which, as you know, is a theatrical experience. You have it. I think it was 7 hours of a play, and I worked with Petty Chayefsky was the lead in it, and our lead female was chosen by him if he could carry her up the steps. That was how she was chosen, not all her talent, but whether she waited lightly enough. So it was an experience. I designed the costumes for it, and I made them very extreme in period, but very like 10-foot trains and things like that. And so that experience to start with was one of my big extravaganzas, huge cast, and every costume was made, including the armor. And going all the way up to probably my favorite musical although I say the one I'm going to do next is my favorite musical. My favorite musical is Stephen Sondheim's Follies, and for obvious reasons. I've designed it twice, I've been in it once, and I directed it once. And I could do it again without any boredom whatsoever. Such an, and the more just this afternoon, I was reading a New Yorker article about the experience of seeing Follies. One New York critic had written, very interesting, because I had many of the same aspects. But I will tell you, Josh, I wouldn't tell anybody what favorites I had while I was still in charge and teaching and things like that. I would just say the next one.
The next
I
one.
love
The one
this.
I'm
I
working
love
on.
that.
Yep. I do remember that. Now, it has in your career, was there a show that you always wanted to do but never got a chance to be a part of it?
Sweeney Todd.
Oh,
I've done
heck.
almost all well, I've done all the sometimes except Assassins, and I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in the Japanese one that I fell asleep in front of Hal Prince watching one time on Broadway, Pacific Overtures. But I've always wanted to do Sweetie Todd, and I never had anybody ask. When I was acting all the time, I wanted to act it, then I wanted to direct it, and then I wanted to design it, and nobody's ever asked me to do it.
Mhm.
So if anybody's trying to, they would need someone, I'm on call.
Well, we're gonna wrap up with our last question for the night. John, we ask this of every interviewer. Is there a bit of advice that you could give to someone who would want to go into your profession? Now, I'll preface that with the fact that you've done it all too. So, is there something that would cover everything you've done?
Something that you should have. And I've been asked this many times, and this is a true answer based on my experience and my love of theater. If you don't have passion for this particular art or any particular art, that is overriding any other thing you would like to do in your life, that is the only time you should go into theater, because it requires so much of your life. It was so much of my life for 55 years. And it is amazing to me. I still love it because I never lost the passion for seeing that curtain go up and watching it start on stage and being tingly all over. The kids always made fun of me because I would tell them that, but even in some other terms, I was absolutely joyous when I retired, not because I wanted to, but because I felt exactly as passionate about it then as I did when I started. And that's why I started. If you don't have it, don't do it. No matter how talented you are, it shows.
Well, thank you, John, so much for tonight's interview. And thank you all for joining us. John, so glad to have you back in the building, in the theater. I'm so happy that we were able to have this time to talk. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you much.